In the year 2007, something remarkable and long overdue happened in the world of peacekeeping. 125 peacekeepers, a unit contingent like many others before it, boarded a flight from India to take on their new deployment with the United Nations mission in Liberia. Now, what set these peacekeepers apart from the hundreds of contingents and troops that had followed them before in the long, long history of United Nations peacekeeping work was that every single one of these peacekeepers was a woman. And look at what they were able to do after more than a decade on the front lines. Not only had these women played an important role in helping the country's progress towards peace, but they had helped the girls and women that they worked with along the way, and concrete numbers tell their story. Female participation in the security forces in Liberia went up from 6% at the start of their deployment to 17% by the time this contingent left. These women reminded us that peace and security, these abstract ideas we engage with every single day in the sector that we are essentially empowering forces. They reminded us that security does not live in the barrel of a silent gun. It doesn't live in the absence of war. It is not an emptiness. The act of security, and here I'm using it as a verb rather than as a common noun, it is a living thing. It is a moral arc. It is restorative justice. It is the life breath of living and thriving communities. It is the wisdom of female elders leading a national parliament in your country. It is the courage of young women leaders fighting for change everywhere. Security and stability, these very abstract ideas that we deal with every day, actually become real when they appear in the form of names of women on the ballot the first time a country takes its first steps towards democracy and holds an election. They live in the pages of the books that girls take with them in their bags the first time they go to school unafraid in a country emerging from conflict. And they live, and this is why this talk is so important specifically for our community, is that they live in the voices of vibrant, gender balanced professional communities in the defense sector, in militaries and security think tanks, in senates and peacekeeping missions, and in every single room where questions of security are being discussed. Now, we know that the new frontiers for international security around the world are complex. These are emerging forces we don't fully understand. We have long since, I think, both in academia and in our professional work, stopped defining risks as just two armies of men, two groups of men with their guns aimed against each other, often armed with the arsenal of weapons of mass destruction. We now know that preventing conflict is not just about maintaining ceasefires or deploying a peacekeeping mission that stands between two opposing forces. It's not just about buffer zones. Real peace building lies in the upkeep of healthy representative democracy in societies rooted in fundamental human rights. It lies in, and above all, amplifying the voices of those who stand on the margins, particularly women. We also now know that risk itself means much more than conflict. The new frontiers of international security and of risk itself, they're not just wars, they're not just two belligerent armies or just militancy or terrorism. They are the emerging ethical landscapes of new weapons technologies, of the new cyber domains of warfare, the changing climate around us, the resource crunches that pit two communities in tension against each other. They are inequality, they are multidimensional poverty. These are, and they lie in the common wars we are fighting as a planet against the truly planetary risks, like the COVID-19 pandemic. But what does any of this, all of this academic thinking about what risk means, what does it mean for women? What does it have to do with gender equality? What's so special about women's leadership? Well, nothing. I mean, nothing innately. There's nothing about women that makes us naturally more adept at the hard work of peace building. And here's the hot take: there's nothing about women within themselves, biologically or innately, that makes us better at peacekeeping. And that's not the argument we should be making. Here is the argument we should be making. The quality of our democracies, the stability of our peace agreements, and the longevity of our post war stability around the world depends on expanding representation. And most concretely, it depends on expanding representation for women. Now, these are not just abstract ideas. I do have numbers to back them up. Let's look at some numbers. Studies tell us that women's presence or participation in peace processes, informal peace processes, increases the odds that a peace agreement is going to last at least 2 years by 20%, and as much as 15 years by 35%. These are big concrete gains. Studies also tell us that if we close the labor gap and the wage gap for women, the global economy would gain $17 trillion of additional economic value. Studies also tell us that when we give women the same access to resources as men, we estimate a rise in agricultural yields by 20 to 30%, which is huge. And more importantly, we can reduce global hunger by up to 17%. And so, what are the tools that we need to build lasting national and international security? We need peace agreements that last 15 years. We need fair and equitable economic growth and better global economic value. We need better food security. We need the alleviation of poverty. And we need expanded representation. So, on the one hand, we have to populate our security communities with the rich experiences and ideas of legions of capable and competent women. On the other hand, we have to recognize how many of our ongoing battles against global risks already rest on their shoulders. It's not just a question of bringing more women up, but about recognizing them. So, where is the gap? Let's take a recent example. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world, we quickly found out that over 70% of healthcare workers around the world were women. But then last week, I'm looking at a UN report that tells me that less than a quarter of the representatives on COVID task forces around the world are women. So here is the gap. Even as we stand on the shoulders of giants and have improved life outcomes for girls and women everywhere in the last few decades, getting more girls in school, reducing the numbers of child marriage, getting more women in the labor force, more women in militaries, more women around us in security think tanks, as we've all seen for ourselves, we have failed to fully unleash the extraordinary potential of women as leaders in peace and security. And this is potential they demonstrate every single day without having a seat at the table. Ordinary women in Somalia dismantling illegal checkpoints set up by militias. Ordinary women in Yemen helping provide humanitarian relief in the most difficult and challenging places. Ordinary women in Syria building communities, fighting the hard battle for human rights. And ordinary women in all of our cities and towns and communities and neighborhoods who march and fight every single day, campaigning for important social change to de-escalate tensions between communities, local communities, running our essential services, growing our food. But 2 full decades after the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 1325 to ensure meaningful participation of women in international peace and security, what have we got? Women make up only 13% of negotiators in formal peace processes. They make up an appalling 6% of all signatories to peace processes around the world. Only 22 countries today have heads of state or heads of government who are women. 119 have never had any. And the world today only has 21 women defense ministers. Women like me who have worked in peace and security, I've worked with the peacekeeping mission in South Sudan, I've worked in the disarmament sector, have been in room after room where belligerents and generals and battalions and ambassadors and experts have been overwhelmingly male. But then an all-female contingent like the one that went to the UN mission in Liberia comes along, and our entire effort to build peace gets a little boost. A community like WCAPS comes along and reveals the sea of talent that needs a bigger voice. If the risks of our future are hybrid and complex, being waged in new landscapes, then the next frontier for international security is gender equality. So the next time any of us, in any part of our careers or any of the work that we're doing in our daily lives, wonders whether we need a woman expert on that panel, a woman led civil society organization in our peace process, a woman stakeholder at the table, let us remember that the inclusion of even one woman levels the playing field just a little bit more. Her leadership expands democracy. Her leadership strengthens the social contracts of our global governance systems by giving them access to a richer diversity of experiences and a larger talent pool. Let us always remember that the inclusion of even once more woman can tip the balance a bit more in our favor as a world at war with global risks. Imagine what full gender equality can do. Thank you.